Over time, our understanding of conflict zones and the charity world began to develop. But one of the founding principles of Iqra was always a balance between Islamic excellence and professionalism. We did not want charity work to become merely logistics and delivery. We wanted it to remain what it truly is, a spiritual amana. To do that, we realized very early that we needed more than good intentions. We needed knowledge. We needed fiqh. We needed to understand the sacred laws of zakat and sadaqah. Because these are not simply donations, they are obligations, trusts, and rights that belong to Allah and to the poor. In order to learn that, we had to find scholars. Syria before the revolution was historically a hub of Islamic knowledge. Students from across the Muslim world would travel to Damascus and Aleppo to study the religion. When the revolution began, many of the major scholars either sided with the regime or sadly fled the country. But Syria remained a melting pot of knowledge, and among the ranks of the revolution were students of knowledge and scholars who had joined the struggle. Now, from amongst these people that we find a trusted group of scholars who became the scholarly board of Iqra. They taught us the fiqh of zakat and sadaqah, guided us in administering the amana properly, and helped us establish Islamic policies that would protect both the organization and the vulnerable people we served. Their role was not simply to issue a fatwa and disappear. They were involved in building systems. They helped us understand how zakat should be distributed, what categories it belongs to, and how to ensure that the poor and needy were truly receiving their rights. But their influence went beyond finance. As the organization grew, we faced many sensitive realities on the ground. We had lone sisters whose husband had been martyred. We had vulnerable widows. We had orphans. We had female prisoners. We had families living without protection. We needed Islamic regulation and guidance on how men and women should interact within the organization, how safeguarding should be structured, and how dignity should be preserved in the delivery of aid. This is where the scholars had a massive impact. They shaped not only what we delivered, but how we delivered it. They ensured that charity remains spiritual service, not simply humanitarian work. Sadly, this is not the case for most charities today, especially third-party fundraising charities. What you will often see is that these charities have celebrity scholars who attend dinners, appear at events, and make emotional fundraising appeals. But the reality is that many of these figures have no role in auditing, governance, zakat distribution, or implementation oversight. They are not part of monitoring teams. They are not shaping policy. They are simply endorsements. When scholarly oversight becomes branding rather than a governance, the charity becomes a business, not a sacred trust. This is where corruption spreads, accountability disappears, and the amount of the Ummah is placed in danger. That is why scholarly oversight is not optional. It is central. Zakat is worship, sadaqah is worship, and worship must be protected. So what should donors ask? You must begin asking charities serious questions, not marketing questions. Ask them, what are your zakat and sadaqah distribution policies? What is your policy for amilin alayha, those who are paid from zakat funds? Amilin alayha. Who are your scholars? Who is your board of scholars that gives approval to your charity? More importantly, ask, are these scholars involved in monitoring and development, or are they simply names on a poster? What Islamic training are you giving your staff in the donor country? What Islamic training are you giving your staff in the crisis country? These are not small questions, these are red lines. If a charity cannot answer them clearly, then that is a major red flag, because without real scholarly oversight, charity drifts away from amana and becomes an industry, and the Ummah cannot afford that.